This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, I will be interviewing Serene Dominic, an author who's written a book called Bacharach Song by Song. And since he died earlier this year, Burt Bacharach, we will be talking a bit about his life and his legacy. The topic is Burt Bacharach, an American composer who died earlier this year in 2023. He's one of the giants of the musical industry. And I'm speaking with Serene Dominic, who's written a book about the songmeister and his songs. So welcome, Serene. As I like to do, I like to let people be able to give a little background about themselves. So if you could tell me a little bit about who you are, your interest in Burt Bacharach, and a little specifics on the book before we get into a deeper dive.
Okay, well, I've been a musician, for like 30 years, so that's my interest is, basically the music. I've also, since 1993, I've been writing for publications, mostly Phoenix New Times and Arizona Republic, and that's how I kind of got interested in. Well, I mean, before I wrote the book, I actually was scheduled to interview Burt Bacharach, and that got canceled. Uh, I don't know if you've ever talked to him. He's like a workaholic. He was always busy doing something. He was getting together with Dr. Dre or somebody. Working on something. So basically, I did an article around the time the Look of Love, that the Rhino 3-disc retrospect came out. The one that Alec Cumming did. He did a great job on it. I mean, such a great job that I was like, I started collecting him right after that. But I did press. I was supposed to interview Burt Bacharach for something to coincide with the release of that box set, and like I said, I didn't get to talk to him. But his in-laws, check this out. His in-laws clipped the article, showed it to him like 6 months later, and I get a call from him. My aunt permission that he was, he was just very happy with it and he appreciated it.
So let's talk then a little bit about Bacharach in terms of background. What's interesting is when he died earlier this year, I would say probably anyone under the age of 40, if they know of him, it was very vaguely. The culture today is just so present day that 5 years is the dinosaurs may as well have been roaming the earth with people in the younger generations. But I've always said that the 1960s were comprised of three types of music: the British invasion, Motown, and everything else was Burt Bacharach, or so it seemed. And so, as a musician, can you tell me a little bit about why you think Bacharach was so dominant in a sense in the 60s and 70s? I mean, so many people recorded and then covered his songs, and his songs, whether it's The Look of Love, whether it's any of the stuff he did with Dionne Warwick, whether he's writing for films, whether he was writing top 40 hits, it seemed that he was just everywhere. When I was a kid growing up, I'm 58, he was on every other variety special had Burt Bacharach doing one of his songs, which was a hit at the time.
Right.
So if you could talk a little bit about him musically,
Well,
what made him so interesting.
probably because he's the only guy that spans the whole spectrum from the Brill Building, from like the Tin Pan Alley,
Yeah.
Songwriters. I mean, because he collaborated with people like, shoot, her name it escapes me for a moment, but um, just like people from that era, the pre-rock era, like he collaborated with those people. So there's that. I mean, his first song that was ever recorded was recorded by Nat King Cole. So you have that. Then you have him kind of his first hit was like a country hit. It was
Really?
Well, his first hit was Magic. The Story of My Life by Marty Robbins. That was like one of the first big hits he had.
Yeah.
So now he's in that realm. Then you got early rock and roll. I mean, he during the 50s. I don't know if you read the book, but like there's like tons of stuff that he wrote, and most of it flopped.
Yeah.
but you had like 10 years of pretty much like stay every day going into an office and writing a song. And I don't know. By the time you get to like maybe the mid '60s, where you have the British invasion in Motown, his he just had his pulse on it. I mean, he had his music had tricky time signatures, and that appealed to like music people, um, and then by that time it just like he crossed all genres, and he was very popular as a performer in England.
Mm.
So pretty much every British invasion group, you know, bar a couple, bar the Stones or whatever, like covered a Burt Bacharach song.
Yeah.
Because they were adventure. And they had and he apprenticed with Lieber and Stoker, you know, so he learned a lot of production from them. So you got, his R&B. I mean, he had R&B stuff, and it was authentic. It wasn't, I mean, he wrote songs for the Drifters and Maxine Brown and people like that.
So,
Chuck Jackson.
but I think when most people think of Bacharach, they think of the '60s and '70s. That was sort of
Right.
like prime time Bacharach. Um, when did he? I mean, people talk about. We mentioned like Motown, the Motown sound, or there's the Wall of Sound, Phil Spector thing. But a Bacharach song, you kind of know, and we could, if you want to bring in Hal David, the lyricist, you kind of know that there's gonna be something interesting going on, whether it's sort of almost neoclassical mixed with a pop sensibility in the lyrics, and the way those two things go together shouldn't go together, you think, but somehow they do go together and form something different, especially compared to the stuff, when it was being released.
Right. Well, also, I mean, the thing with Hal David that's great is he didn't write a lot of trite lyrics. Most of them are pretty, well considered, even things that maybe today aren't considered politically correct, like Wives and Lovers.
Let's see, let me just.
So, well, I was saying about Wives and Lovers. I mean, if you go to any of his concerts, can you hear me?
Yeah.
When you go to his concerts, he only does an instrumental version of it because I mean, the whole premise of that song is, hey, you better gussy yourself up, or you're practically giving your husband permission to cheat on you,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously that's not something that would go over well today. But how David wrote, very cinematic. His all his lyrics have like a story. You can see it, you can visualize it, and it yeah, like they're not like trite lyrics. I mean, because you can go back to other songwriting teams, and like they're like kind of dumbing down to teenagers, but they never dumb down to like a teenage market. I mean, you might have one or two examples of something like that, but
Well, how do you think that the team of Bacharach and David stack up against people like Rodgers and Hart, or Rodgers and Hammerstein, or Lerner and Lowe? You're talking about Tin Pan Alley, the classic musicals.
well, I think because they come from that era. I mean, Hal David was writing lyrics to um, like he wrote Bell Bottom Blues, which I think Patty Page recorded or something. Uh, I mean, he was writing. He's from that era, so. Um, but you still have people from that era that couldn't write for a rock audience,
Mm-hmm.
They kind of just gave up. But he was perfect, Hal David. And, he had two teenage sons. I mean, he wrote um, The Windows of the World, when they were of age to be drafted, because he was worried about, the sons going off to war and dying.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anybody else from that era writing songs, for a pop audience, with, quasi-protest lyrics to them.
So what was the first hit that put Bacharach on the map as far as like superstar, where he was Burt Bacharach? Was this before he met teamed up with Hal David, or was this after?
No, I think he became a name after teaming up with Hal David because he wrote. I mean, he wrote with a lot of different people in the '50s, and he wrote a lot of songs with Bob Hilliard. So right around the time, actually, he wrote with Bob Hilliard. He started writing more frequently with Hal David, and but the thing of him being the face of the songwriting team was definitely the TV specials,
Hmm.
and um, but before he was, like I said, before he was famous here, he was famous in England, and he made TV appearances there where he sang, you
Hmm.
know, and then he became more famous, in the states around the time actually he was with Angie Dickinson, because that's also when he started scoring movies too. So he was, he was consistent. I think 3 years in a row maybe he had um, things up for an Oscar. Like he wrote the score to What's New Pussycat, and then he had Casino Royale, and then he had Butch Cassidy, and that's when he finally won an Oscar.
So you mentioned how uh, he was a workaholic, and he was day in and day out going into the office to work and write on songs. Do you think he was satisfied with just the work itself, or did he embrace the fame, or was it a necessary evil to him to get the work out to become famous, to become Burt Bacharach?
I think he enjoys the work. I don't think he ever liked the fame aspect of it too much because when he did the uh, Lost Horizons score, the soundtrack to that, and that was a huge flop. He was the one that was the most famous of the people that you could point to and say, this is a flop,
Mm.
and nobody knew who Hal David was, but they knew who he was. He hid out. He said when I interviewed him, he said I hid out for a year because I didn't want to run into people.
So the other famous collaborator with him was Dionne Warwick, and they had, I guess you'd call it, I don't know if you'd call it turbulent, but they had sort of an oftentimes contentious relationship. So you have the two sort of biggest name partners. Was Dionne Warwick? How instrumental was she in terms of his songs? Because you think of someone like maybe Diana Ross or Barbara Streisand or whatnot, they would not have necessarily fit into his sound as well because they were such divas themselves. Do you think he needed, I guess, a more laid back singer like Dionne Warwick seems to have been?
Well, she could sing anything and sing it without any struggle, and I think that's what attracted her to the team because his songs are not easy to sing. Um, but she kind of just moves over it kind of effortlessly, and her effortless singing is a lot of what made them so popular. Um,
So, what would
that
you?
she doesn't have the grit. She doesn't have the grit in her voice of like somebody like Chuck Jackson singing a Burt Bacharach song. Or
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's almost got. There's an effortlessness it seems to her vocals.
right. But so for a guy like Bacharach that composes melodies,
Mm-hmm.
that was like irresistible to him. What she could sing anything that and he can't really sing. He would have been the first to admit it that he didn't sing, couldn't sing. Do you hear him demoing the songs? It's like he kind of just sneaks up on the note. He doesn't really hit it.
Mm-hmm. So, what is a typical kind of Bacharach song and a typical kind of Bacharach hit? If there's something different, what separates those songs that we all know from the Dionne Warwicks from the '60s and '70s? You mentioned the scores to Tom Jones, "What's New Pussycat," and what separates that from, let's say, the stuff that was earlier, that before he became a name, and some of the later stuff? Or is there a separation, or is it just a roll
Well,
of the dice?
the separation is in the '50s. He wasn't producing until Make It Easy on Yourself, which he did with Jerry Butler in like 62, 63, somewhere around there. He wasn't producing the tracks, so they were pretty much taking all his songs, and if they were in a weird time signature, they would put it in 4/4 time, like just bang, bang, So it's not until he starts arranging the session, and even though he may not get a production credit, he's there at the session, conducting or something. And once that happens, that's when things start to really happen for them. So what separates it is that you're finally getting his songs the way he wanted you to hear them. You know what I mean?
So I'm just looking here. It says that Warwick recorded his songs, 38 singles over the course of 2 decades, and 22 in the top 40. So when I guess if you think just broadly, those songs, the David Bacharach Warwick trio, are probably one of the most productive trios in musical history. And when I'm just looking at some of the songs like I'll Never Fall in Love Again, Walk On By, Do You Know the Way to San Jose, just as a song writer yourself, what makes, if you wanted to pick one of those songs, what do you think is the thing that draws the listener in? You're driving down the road, you listen to it, and boom.
Okay, well, take a song like Walk On By. You got 3 things happening. You got a memorable instrumental hook, like the walk on, and that beat. You got like the lyrics, which are most of Hal David's lyrics in the '60s and many of the ones that she did were about a breakup where she's miserable. She's in a miserable relationship, and you're just hearing her private confession. So that brings the listener in, and those 2 things alone, you got, and you got the instrumental hook, you got the memorable melody, and then you got a great story. Even a lot of the songs that aren't, did become big hits, have all those elements. They just didn't catch on with the public the same way. I think with her miserable songs, she never really sounds miserable. But like if you take a song like there's a song on that box set called "There Goes the Forgotten Man." It's this guy is just he's just been dumped by his girlfriend, and how everyone's laughing at him and stuff. It's a hard listen because it's like he conveys this sadness, but Dionne Warwick, her voice doesn't convey the misery, so much. So I think that was kind of an added element, like people were listening to it and they're just like, oh, it just sounds pretty,
Yeah, it's like her voice floats above whatever emotional stuff. Whereas if I think if I think someone like Diana Ross would probably, I think of Diana Ross and Dionne Warwick as sort of the '60s answer to Ella Fitzgerald is sort of the Dionne Warwick, and Billie Holiday is sort of like the Diana Ross. The Diana Ross and Billie Holiday would get inside out of the emotions, whereas Ella and Dionne would sort of be above the fray, so to speak.
Yeah, to them, like the song is a vehicle for them. That voice, they just follow it. Like if you look even at clips of Dionne Warwick singing "Walk On By," when she's singing it on like the Ed Sullivan Show or something, she's smiling and everything. There's no, but it's a really despairing song.
Yeah. Now let me ask this, because I know. You mentioned 2 films that actually from the mid-'60s were sort of spoof farces with What's New Pussycat and Casino Royale. Both of them had Woody Allen.
The same director.
Yeah, they both had Woody Allen in it. And Tom Jones sings, What's New Pussycat, and it's odd because Tom Jones is almost the exact opposite of someone like a Dionne Warwick. Is that he's almost a vaudevillian, and he had that that big
he's definitely over the top.
Yeah.
Like
and yet it works for that.
Yeah, but in that period, especially he was, like, did you ever see the album of his called Atomic Jones, where he's like swiveling his hips and there's the atomic bomb blast right behind him, you know. When I interviewed him, I asked him about that. He's like, "Where did I was exploding? I couldn't contain me," and that's kind of how they marketed him. That
Yeah.
whole album is full of songs where he's pretty much singing like he's God's gift to women, and, and women ate it up. So What's New Pussycat is kind of a cartoony song in a way. I mean,
Well,
that
it's
was
sort of
written.
silly bombast.
Yeah, but yeah, but
But yet
that,
it's got that hook. I mean, it's a song that you remember.
yeah, yeah. But it's definitely still in the period where he's singing over the top stuff. No, he's not really like but his hits aren't these deep emotional things. I mean, that would come later.
So, do you think that, at least in this period, do you think that he was better writing for the female voice than the male voice, or what? I mean, because when I think of covers, whether it's someone like Vic Damone or Jones, or a group like the Zombies in the UK that covered quite a bit of his songs, and then I think of
Well, they actually only did one of his songs. They did "The Look of Love," and it was just on the BBC. Um,
okay.
and they did a great version of it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm a big Zombies fan, but do, do do you think that are there certain songs that are better for the masculine voice and better for the feminine voice? And do you think that they wrote to that, or could I mean?
I mean, they did write to. I mean, they did write to order, but then again, I don't think until they heard it, they knew if it was like they originally wrote "Message to Michael." It was just "Message to Martha," and then had a male voice singing it,
Uh-huh.
and then they decided it was better for a female. I think she actually, uh, it was first the song was written for Marlene Dietrich. She was,
Yeah.
she did Klein, or whatever it is, Klein Nightingale or something. It was a Flyaway Bluebird. I don't really know if the lyrics translated. But they would write songs for Gene Pitney, and then if Gene Pitney didn't do it, Dionne Warwick. But I think they always I think they had a policy where Dionne Warwick would get first dibs on things, and she passed on What the World Needs Now, and I think they were originally wrote that for Gene Pitney to do, and they had a falling out with him and his manager.
Well, who was the original singer? I know what the world needs now is love.
Yeah,
Who was?
Jackie DeShannon.
Okay, because I know it has been covered again 100 times at
Yeah,
least.
you know what? I actually recently wrote a thing. That song was inducted into the Library of Congress
Hmm.
as like a notable song. They every year they nominate. They put in certain songs, and one of the ones they did this year was "What the World Is Now," and they asked me to write a thing about that, and that's one of those songs where everybody covered it, but I think only one version of it that's any good is the Jackie DeShannon one. Even I'm not really even that impressed by Dionne Warwick's version of it. You know why? Because there's a little bit of anger in the Jackie DeShannon one.
Hmm.
This impatience about how we don't. Here comes God with another mountain. Ah, nuts. We don't need that. Um,
Well, speaking of the sort of TV specials, there were a lot of cheesy renditions of it. If you ever watch like the King Sisters or the King Family special,
right, right.
Donnie and Marie covering something.
Yeah, and even when he had his specials, that was his walk on, da, 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 and he would come out and do his special. It became like a signature song, but it wasn't like there's a lot of anger in that song.
Hmm.
Like how long do we have to wait for this? This love, why are we getting another river? Like why isn't God listening to us? It's there's anger in there, and even now Jackie DeShannon's voice is also very sweet on that. That the anger is in like the background vocals saying "What the world is not," the gospelly singers in the background of that's where the anger comes in.
Well,
And no other singer covers it with that. They cover it like what like you
yeah,
heard Tony Bennett's version of it. It's what the world needs now.
yeah.
It's love and sweet love.
Well, that's what I
It's
mean. This some of the songs could if with a bad arrangement or people who didn't get the songs, like say the King Family or Donnie and Marie, it could really be schlocky.
yeah, yeah. Well, and and because he probably would go on the Tonight Show, and that's the song that they would play him on with. You forget that the song's even about. Um, I mean, yeah, you could schlock up any song really, if you wanted to, but that one is just unique in that every version of it is crummy, pretty much. I don't think I've heard any other versions that I like. Whereas the Look of Love, all you have to do is sing that song, and I mean, you have to really go out of your way to ruin the Look of Love. Everybody that's done it, I mean, the fucking Vanilla Fudge did
Yeah,
the Look of Love, and they do incredible version of it,
part of the greatest cover band ever.
Yeah, well, their thing would be to take a song and just stretch it on a rack until
Yeah.
like snap. But the Delphonics have a great version of the Look of Love. Uh, you got the Sergio Mendes version of it, which is kind of pretty light fare, but it's a really good version. The Zombies, of course, Lady Kazan. I don't know. I mean, you just really have to. You really, unless you go way out of your way to ruin that song. I mean, it's almost impossible. The melody's there, the beat, and that little samba beat. It's all baked in the cake.
Let's talk about I'll Never Fall in Love Again. Until I actually was just looking up some of the stuff in preparation for this, I never realized it was from a play. I thought it was just another top 40 hit. And so I'm reading here that he did Promises, Promises, a Broadway play or musical. So tell me a little bit about that. Was that his first foray into Broadway as the primary music man?
Yeah, that was the first musical that they wrote. They did one thing for television. That was like a one shot thing. That might have been like a dress rehearsal for doing it. But yeah, basically they approached them with the idea of like, well, would you do it if we got a really good director? They had David Merrick. I mean, he was a big producer at the time. They got Neil Simon to write it. It was all around from a slam dunk. But that was the first time that they had to go write a whole score. Then the show opens off Broadway, and then they had to go and like, these songs aren't working. Let's change these. We need another song, and that song came out of. They did a tryout. I want to say in Boston, or yeah, somewhere off Broadway. I think it was Boston, and David Merrick was like threw out 4 songs from the show, and he was like, we need something here at this scene, and then that's when they came up with um, I'll Never Fall in Love Again, and actually Bacharach was in the hospital. He was in the hospital at the time. Like he got pneumonia. That's why that line is in the song. You get enough germs to catch pneumonia. He was hospitalized with pneumonia, and he still had David Merrick saying, "We need this other song. Where are you going to come up with this other song?" So they begrudgingly gave him that one. And it had the line about you get enough germs to catch pneumonia.
So what was the actual play about? Because I'll Never Fall in Love Again is another one of those kind of Dionne Warwick songs where it sounds like there's some bitterness to it, but again, she's flying above the emotion of it. So was this a happy musical? Was this...
Well, it was based on. Did you ever see the movie The Apartment with Jack?
Oh yeah.
Remember
Shirley MacLaine.
That's the Shirley MacLaine character after she almost commits suicide.
Okay.
Yeah. And then she's kind of being nursed back to health by Jack Lemmon, and she just happens to pick up a guitar and starts
Hmm.
playing this song. And that's when she sings "I'll Never Fall in Love Again"
Okay. I never knew. I mean, I
at the end of
know
the
about
show.
I know about the apartment, but I never knew the connection to that song.
Yeah, and that almost, and that wasn't in the original tryouts for the show.
So were there any other signature songs other than "I'll Never Fall in Love Again" that came from there?
Well, the song "Promises," the title song,
Uh-huh.
which Jerry Orbach from you forget because he was in what is it, Law and
Yeah,
Order. Jerry
Law and
Orbach.
Order, yeah, something like that.
You forgot that he was his background was Broadway. I mean, he did the Fantastics, and he had to sing that song night after night, and he had a hard time with it until he heard Dionne Warwick's recording of it.
Yeah. And
Then I guess he figured out how to breathe and get through that song.
it won a Grammy that year too, or the next year actually. Um, and then another. I mean, this is again another classic song, "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head" from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I remember that as a child. That was all over the radio. I think that was 1960. That and I think the theme next year from Love Story. Those were like two big songs that I remember from
Yeah.
around that era. Um, uh, now that was
That won an Oscar.
for
That won
best
an
song.
Oscar
For
for
best
best
song.
song. Then they got a best score. Yeah, I think they won like 2 or 3 Oscars. Best song,
Yeah, "The Look of Love," "What's New
best.
Pussycat," "Alfie." Alfie's another one from him.
Yeah, that one has kind of a weird history because it's in the movie, but there's different people singing it in different versions of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
Cilla Black it was originally a British movie, and Cilla Black sang it for the British movie, and then you got when it was in America, they had Cher singing it, and
Yeah.
her version is you know is not the one that's produced by Bacharach. I mean,
What's it all
it's
about,
kind of,
Alfie? Who sung the single version?
well, I don't even know if it was released as a single in America with Cilla Black. I think the Cher version was like the highest charting version of it until Dionne Warwick sang it. Dionne Warwick sang it even after Dee Dee Warwick sang it.
Okay, because I'm thinking the when I hear that song, what's it all
When you
about?
hear that, yeah, you think
I don't think of Cher.
Dionne Warwick, right? No, and it's and it sounds like it's the same kind of production, kind of wall of sound production that Sonny Bono did on all their records.
So
Um,
I'm just looking here. Apparently, in 1971, there was just a special called "Singer Presents Burt Bacharach." Um, that's very unusual. That one individual. I mean, it's one thing if you're talking the Beatles or a rock band, but this is one guy who's writing these songs along with Hal David, and yet he's getting his own television special. I mean,
yeah, it's
I'm
pretty unique.
that would be the equivalent of today. Let's say Taylor Swift getting her own hour on television, the Taylor Swift special.
Mm. I'm trying to think of another composer that even maybe came close to getting that. I mean, Anthony Newley, he was certainly popular, but not enough to get his own TV special. I mean, I'm sure Marvin Hamlish maybe afterwards, got the Burt Bacharach treatment, but no, he was pretty unique, and then plus he was married to Angie Dickinson, so you have that kind of extra cachet. They do Martini and Rossi commercials together. That had a lot of star power.
So I'm looking here too. I never knew this. Lost Horizon. I've seen the old movie from the 30s. It's that Lost Horizon and Beau Geste were like movies that seem to define that period. And yet there was a musical version of it that was made in '73.
Yeah,
Were there
that
any
was
songs that were hits that came from that film?
not really. I mean, the songs that were there that were released as singles were not big hits. Living Together, Growing Together, that wasn't a big hit, and the song Lost Horizon wasn't a big hit. No, A World Is a Circle. I mean, that might be the only other one that kind of you might have been in danger of hearing on somebody else's TV show. No, it was a complete flop, and the horrible part about that is, unlike composing for a musical where you see it's not working and you can change it before it gets to Broadway.
Yeah.
The movie, you're pretty much stuck.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that movie?
No, I've seen the original Lost Horizon. I had no idea that it was a musical.
Yeah, you should. I think you can watch it on Amazon. It's pretty much it's interesting in that you won't see another movie like it. In a good way and in a bad way. It's pretty much after the theme song of Lost Horizon. It's 40 minutes of an Irwin Allen disaster movie. You got all the people getting on the plane. And then there's a plane crash, and then once they land in Shangri-La, it turns into this musical. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of
It almost sounds like an
where you
adult version of the Wizard of Oz. She.
It is, but it's almost like after having been given 40 minutes of like character building and all this psychodrama, like a movie like Airplane or something, then you're thrust into this musical and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Now, by the time we get to the end of, I guess we'd call the golden age of Bacharach, the 60s and 70s, he has another act there, and that's with Carol Bayer Sager, who is a well-known songwriter in her own right, and they have a string of hits with some with Christopher Cross. I'm just looking here, Neil Diamond, Roberta Flack, Patti LaBelle. Those kinds of songs were big in their day, but they don't seem, at least to me, and maybe I'm wrong, they don't seem to have the staying power in the mind when people think of Burt Bacharach the way the 60s and 70s songs do. Is that so? And if so, what do you think accounts for that, even though they're fine enough songs?
They don't seem to be ever omnipresent, like some of those big Bacharach. I mean, granted, look, he got 3 number ones. He had On My Own, the Arthur theme, and That's What Friends Are For. I don't even think. I think wait, maybe Hal David. Did they have 3 number ones? Yeah, they also had 3 number ones, but the 3 number ones that Burt Bacharach and Hal David had were Close to You, This Guy's in Love with You, and Raindrops. So most of the songs that he wrote with Carol Bayer Sager, they also had somebody else in on the deal. There's always like a lot of 3-way, 4-way collaborations, and I don't think those songs, for the most part, hold up.
Well, it's like too many cooks spoil the broth.
Well, yeah. They're just, I don't know. I don't know why they don't hold up. I mean, there's definitely not that, drama in any of their songs. I mean, I'm not saying, she's a good enough lyricist, but I don't know. It just, it could be that. It could be just that it's like writing by committee, Whereas, like, I don't think the music takes any chances. It's not really a lot of risk taking. He was pretty much damaged goods, But when he met her, I mean, she was having hits, but he wasn't. He came off of Lost Horizon, and he was like not having any hits.
Mm-hmm. So, what often happens, it seems to me, with music of the last 50 or 60 years is after the initial period of success, whether it's a rock band, whether it's someone like Bacharach or some of the other people we've mentioned, or whether it's a solo act, oftentimes they get their second act in collaboration with younger musicians or stars, and they do a lot of collaborations. That seems to have been what from say the '90s on that Burt Bacharach was doing with like you mentioned a hip hop. Was it Jay-Z? You mentioned he did something with.
Dr. Dre,
Oh,
yeah. I
Dr.
mean, he
Dre.
did some stuff with Dr. Dre. I don't think that that was particularly commercially successful.
Yeah,
And then his stuff with Costello,
yeah,
I
Elvis
mean,
Costello.
I think that was a great pairing because Costello has the same sense of drama in his lyrics that Hal David did.
Well, I think
Um,
Elvis Costello also has a bit of that Tin Pan Alley in him too, with a rock sensibility.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's like he has like a rocket encyclopedia in his head of references and things that
Did Burt,
base songs on.
speaking of, did Burt Bacharach ever collaborate? Who's the fellow from the Stray Cats who
Brian Setzer?
yeah, did he ever work with Brian Setzer? That would have been an interesting combination.
No,
No,
I don't, yeah,
because Setzer
I
has
don't
that
even
sort
know.
of 40s swing kind of thing that he brought back when he was with the Stray Cats in the
Yeah,
early mid
I
80s.
don't. Yeah, I don't even know that maybe he even covered any Bacharach songs.
No.
Uh, they did cover the Everly Brothers or something.
So what were the last? What was the last? Well, let's say the turn of the century. Was was he doing anything new, or was he sort of in emeritus, form? He the sort of musical genius emeritus.
Yeah, well, that means he's definitely like an elder statesman at this point. We could just rest on the laurels, but he was doing a lot of trying to write. It's really weird too because they did Promises, and it was a huge success. I mean, it won Tonys and everything. It kind of changed the way Broadway musicals were done at that point,
Uh-huh.
because before then you just had to have a big orchestra, but they had a small band as the pit band for that show. Um, but they never did another stage musical, and I think in the last 20 years of his life, he was working on a lot of different things to be stage musicals that they were. He was working with Costello on a stage musical based on the songs from Painted from Memory. He was working on a version of a musical version of is it Cinderella or something? Yeah, yeah, with um, the guy who wrote was it Mike and the Mechanics? I don't know.
Mike Rutherford.
No, 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 no. I think like I think one of the guys that sang with. I don't know. I mean, he also they did like one of those anthology shows around Burt Bacharach and Hal David songs. Um, Some Lovers. I think he wrote with the guy who did shoot. I gotta look this up. A lot of this stuff I gotta look up because it's not stuff that's past the point with uh, uh, that the book covers. He wrote with Tony Okay. Do you know him?
No, I don't.
Some Lovers. Oh, Steven Sater. Did Steven Sater do Spring Awakening or something? Yeah, I don't know. Steven Sater.
Hmm.
Sater.
So
Um,
I know that I'm just looking here that they had a few Burt Bacharach nights on the original American Idol when it first came on with Paul Abdul and Simon Cowell, that version. Um, so what? Let's talk a little bit because I said earlier that maybe if we could break down one of Burt Bacharach's sort of quintessential songs. Is there a song if you had to pick, the top 3 or 4 songs that come to your mind? Pick one of them and talk about how that works on the listener to sort of hook them in. I mean, is there a song that you can say, well, here, you notice when he changes this time structure, or when the chorus comes in just after a sad moment? Is there a way that you can formalize what made Bacharach different from his peers?
kind of like what I said before about Walk On By. I'm trying to think of another song that also adheres to that. formula. Uh,
Well, how about something like "The Look of Love"? Because you said that's a hard song to fuck up, basically.
yeah.
So
Well, you got the beat. You always have a very sensual vocals. All you have to do is sound sensual to to be the vocal equivalent of was it Ursula Andress? Was she the one that was in Casino Royale that he was watching her? Supposedly, I guess while he was composing it, he just kept watching that scene over and over again with Ursula Andress. Um, and then he always has a melody that you could sing or hum or whistle.
mm,
I mean, so in Look of Love, you also have like a
mm,
see, I can't even whistle, and I
yeah,
can sing. I got all those notes. So,
yeah.
um, um, yeah, I mean, okay. How about a song like "This Guy's in Love with You"? I mean, there's probably about like 5 notes in that song. You see this guy in love with you. Anybody can sing that song and have a hit with it.
Yeah.
There's
So,
not I mean, Herb Alpert, for Christ's sakes. Herb Alpert wasn't a vocalist, and he he's kind of like a timid singer, like it kind of almost like Chris Montez, kind of like, very, very soft spoken. He had the #1 hit with that song. Um,
it also seemed to me, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you could. 'Cause I want to talk a little bit about his legacy, but it seemed to me that in the mid to late '60s, his legacy was even on contemporary people. There's lots of songs that come to mind that I know aren't Burt Bacharach songs, but they sound like it musically. There was that big hit, dum dum da dum 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 da da
oh,
da.
Love Is Blue.
Yeah, it has. And I'm an amateur. Maybe I'm wrong, but there were a number of hit songs that were just. I mean, the '60s, you could still
Yeah,
get a hit song without lyrics. And yet that songs like that and a few others that just don't come to mind
right.
sound Baccharachian.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah, like have a prominent horn part, or um, I don't know. I mean, you were getting a lot of actually instrumental hits in the '60s. I mean, you had Henry Mancini still
Yeah.
doing, stuff. Um, no, I think when people think of Bacharach, they think of like kind of a samba, or they kind of think of like a light kind of pop thing, which is really kind of a fraction of what he does. But um, think about the 3 #1 songs that he had: "Raindrops," "Close to You," and uh, um, "This Guy's in Love with You." And those are all songs that have very few notes in it, so anybody could sing it. And I think that's why those songs. I mean, that's why those songs were such big hits, because everybody could sing those songs.
So let's just talk a
The
little bit.
mailman could sing "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head." Perfect.
So let's talk just a bit about his legacy. We're recording this in 2023, a few months after he died. Um, where in the musical pantheon would you place someone like Burt Bacharach? Whether we're talking going back to old time musicals and vaudeville through the rock era to now, and
Well,
where do you
he's the only one that traversed that whole spectrum,
yeah.
and we're not going to see anybody else do that. We're not going to see anybody that connect Tin Pan Alley with the Brill Building and the Drifters and all of the R&B groups of the early '60s, through the British invasion, through the easy listening of the early '70s, and all the way through to, I mean, he had forays into work, like, even though he didn't work on any of these rap records. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of it. I do mention it in the book. He's the "Walk On By," not the Isaac Hayes version of "Walk On By,"
Mm.
is the most sampled of any song in rap.
Oh,
I
really?
mean, hundreds of people have just sampled that, and his name is on there. So, like, maybe in 100 years you won't remember, that he wrote "Walk On By," but you might, see his name, on a Notorious B.I.G. song, if that's even remembered. But still, you gotta say that he played a role in all those eras, and now the trail gets cold. Now there's not going to be anybody, you know, anybody starting tomorrow is kind of playing catch up. I think to somebody like Burt Bacharach.
So do you think that
Plus,
like
plus the fact that uh, he won an Emmy, Tony,
Grammy
Oscar,
and Grammy?
Grammy.
Well,
Yeah,
what do they call it? The Ego Award, or EGOT? Tree.
EGOT.
Yeah.
Is there one other one? But Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony, EGOT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something like, yeah. I that just came to mind because I think
I
somewhere.
mean, I don't know if I don't know about the Emmy. I mean, one of his specials won an Emmy. I don't know if that constitutes like
Okay.
they may have got he may have gotten it for like best lighting or something. I don't know. But I would say, I mean, he had a lot of TV specials, and that was you know
So who do you think that when people look back, say at the end of this century, do you think that he's someone who's going to be in the same breath with like the Gershwins, or is he that kind of a figure? Do you think?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I just hope he's remembered more than the Gershwins, because I don't think you can stop anybody on the street and ask them, what did Gershwin write? They're gonna, remember to say Porgy and Bess or something. I don't know. I don't know if like you said, the limited attention span of people now, how they're gonna revere any of this stuff. I mean, you you'd think that somebody that was as big as Sinatra would still be like prominent, in people's psyche, and I don't think that's the case. I don't know that. I don't meet a lot of 20-year-olds that have an appreciation for Sinatra.
Well,
That didn't have a
that,
dad
that you
was
bring up a good
Sinatra.
point. Let me just ask you one final question, and then we'll go ahead. There's a fellow named Rick Beato who does a musical channel. You know of him.
Yeah.
So he's always been active against the musical companies trying to shut down sampling from different artists and whatnot online. If you're doing a 20-minute video on
Right.
why
Yeah.
the Yardbirds were great or something, you take some songs, then the music company pounds down on them. And he did an interesting video. I don't know if you regularly follow him. I get his feed every so often. He did one on why why record companies are killing their own future their future earnings by doing that. Because he said, like, if you look at they call it the billion view club or whatnot. Which songs and which artists get billion views. So he said, like Jimi Hendrix, for example, his company always shuts stuff down, and even the Beatles have been notorious in the past. The Eagles are
Yeah.
notorious for shutting down, and a handful of other bands. I think Guns N'
Yeah,
Roses.
I
is
can
one.
remember. Um, trying to find Hotel California a couple years ago on YouTube, and it was all I could see were cover versions. Of it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just like,
yeah. And same thing, like only recently did they put out the original Strawberry Fields by the Beatles. Before that, you'd listen to these cover bands. But do you, how do you think, does Bacharach or his company, do they allow more of that? Because it seems to me that I agree with Rick Beato that if companies are smart, they'll allow this sampling and not worry about someone.
because it's education.
Yes.
It's educational. His videos. They're trying to get it like, well, he's making money off of it. He's not selling their songs. He's explaining them.
And
That's,
he's
I mean,
widening
that's
he's widening a future audience.
exactly. Yeah, has Beato ever done anything on Bacharach? I'm curious.
Off the top of my head, it wouldn't. I mean, he's got probably 800 videos or something. So I'm sure he probably has. But
I haven't followed. I haven't followed him in a while. I think I was following him when he was having that argument about because I was
and
also
he testified
I
at Congress too about it.
Yeah, because I was also doing a live cast
Hmm.
where I would perform songs, and sometimes like I would use like a karaoke version of a song, and then you get cited, like oh copyright whatever. But
Yeah.
I was kind of just interested. I'm like I'm not monetizing. I'm not making any money off of it. I just like to sing that song.
But the record company for Bacharach, those companies, they don't do that. You think?
I don't. Yeah, I don't think they go after because his songs are recorded by so many different people.
Yeah.
I don't think you could. You know.
Yeah. Because
I don't think anybody's sampling his singing
yeah,
his songs.
because who knows? I mean, I've said this a couple of times to musicians. If you went back 200 years ago, uh, they weren't listening to J.S. Bach. It wasn't until I think Mozart and then Beethoven sort of brought him back. And it's one of those things. You can be as popular in your day, but if you
Yeah,
don't, if you're not expanding the market or the base for
right.
your music, you're going to
Yeah,
shrivel up.
and to an extent, that's kind of like if you use like the collector's guide, like what things are going up in collector's value.
Uh-huh.
You can see where a lot of uh, bands or whatever are kind of like sort of dropping in terms of value. You
Yeah.
know, even if it's what they're offering is rare. Like Elvis. I mean, the collector's market for Elvis has gone way, way down. Maybe it's gone up since that movie, but they didn't do a lot of legacy building. Like, if you look at how the Beatles have done it, every couple of years they have something that reignites and starts
Yeah.
up, a thing where, and then you go back to their whole catalog. You go, holy fuck! This one band did all this in like 7 years. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like the greatest story ever told when you watch like you know any retrospective of the Beatles, because they went from doing this all the way to doing that, and then they stopped when it was still good.
Yeah.
You know,
So
you don't have 20 years of shitty emotional rescue kind of
yeah,
albums.
yeah. The,
You
the the
know,
Rolling Stones are the poster
the
boys
Rolling Stones, yeah, the Rolling
for
Stones pretty much,
eking out
yeah.
everything. You know.
I mean, if they had stopped, in '81 or whatever,
Yeah.
people would say, "What a pristine catalog they have."
Yeah.
But now, they just have so many so what records that
Yeah.
try
So,
to.
just to get back to end with Bacharach, for anyone who hasn't listened to Burt Bacharach and has just stumbled across this, what would give you a pitch for why they should listen to Bacharach and why was a great American composer?
He's just more adventurous than pretty much any other composer of that time. I mean, the time signatures, the different rhythms that he would have on his tracks. Hal David's lyrics, pretty much you know unsurpassed.
Hmm.
Eh, but the thing that's interesting though is like when I started to collect Bacharach, it was a very fun thing to do because um, it wasn't like I was just collecting, you know, like if you were collecting the Beach Boys and you're just collecting the Beach Boys and whatever they did as a unit. No, you're getting all these other different artists and their takes on what he did. So if you get like something like and that's why that 3 disc Rhino Look of Love that they put out in the '90s by Alec Cumming. That's like the best sampler there is. It pretty much runs the gamut of all the different pockets that he was in.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it's great. I would, and every time I would find a new song or a song that was only recorded once, it was a big thrill. That's why I did the book. I wound up collecting, and then I wound up, I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually did stop. But,
Well, I will link to that book, Burt Bacharach, song by song. I'll link to your Amazon page or the Amazon page for it for anyone who wants to read your book and find out more about Burt Bacharach. So, Serene, thanks for speaking with me for about an hour about Burt Bacharach.
thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure.
1, 2, 3, out.